Hello there, guys, and welcome back to my channel for something different, for something that we actually haven't had the time to do in a little while. A bit of a Chelsea news roundup, mainly talking about how Chelsea don't really know what to do with Mauricio Pochettino right now, or generally with their manager situation. We'll get into that. As you can see, I am already joined by Conor. Thank you, Conor, for coming on. Pyce will join us very soon. He's currently stuck in traffic, but he should be here in a few minutes' time. Conor, it's been a weird situation at Chelsea where, well, we lost 5-0 to Arsenal, and we all thought the world is going to end. And no, actually, I should rephrase. Well, we all thought the world has ended. And then since then, in the second half at Villa Park, Pochettino has turned it all around. And now we don't, a lot of us, including myself, don't really know what to think. Because I'm like, flipping hell. I was, since Wolves away on Christmas Eve, I was very adamantly Poch out, because I'm like, this is just nah. I just need to see something. And some people think we're flip-flopping a bit too soon. And I'm not fully in the camp yet of Poch needs to stay now. Where I am actually is, if we play the last 3 games to a similar level to what we've played these last 2, I think there is very much a case to be made that he not only could he stay, but maybe that he should stay. Because I feel a little bit myself, I would feel like a bit of a hypocrite if he makes tactical changes, which is what I've been asking for months, and then he does it, and then I pretend like it didn't happen, and I still want him out equally as much as I did before. Like then I would, to myself, not feel particularly objective. At the same time, the problem is now that he's made this change so late in the season, there's not really enough time to see whether and how quickly the system under Poch could get found out, and then what? So it's like we have like 5 games now where we're like, okay, great new system, but we might play that first game on August 12th next season, and already everybody might have figured out what to do against it. Like, I'm not saying that will happen, but, you know, ask Antonio Conte about it. That 3-4-3 worked well for 17 games? It won us the league, but after that, it basically didn't work anymore. So, and then what did we do after? We still came 5th, won the FA Cup, much better than the last 2 years for sure. But it just didn't work the same anymore. Even Thomas Tuchel, you could argue, it worked, won us the Champions League, worked a little bit at the beginning with Lukaku, and then once Lukaku started going off, the whole system kind of started not working anymore because we couldn't attack it. The defense, like, we were too error prone. It's a weird one. So, Conor, sorry for my waffle. I'll bring you into it. Where do you stand on this tactical change? Do you think it's like literally the greatest thing since sliced bread? Obviously, it's not revolutionary by any means. Like, he's not exactly the first manager that has done that. But is it the greatest thing since sliced bread? Or do you think, well, this will work for a little while, and then eventually the opponents will do certain few things, and then all of a sudden it won't work equally as much as before?
I think in 2 ways it's not the best thing since sliced bread, obviously. Like you said, it's not revolutionary. This is like something that we've been crying out for since pre-season, since we saw it then. It's a base level structure that a lot of teams run with, and by inverting Cucurella, that's how we've now come into this 3-2-5. At the start of the season, both fullbacks were holding width at one point, and then in pre-season we sort of saw Cucurella invert a little bit, so we knew that he sort of had this in his range of plans somewhere along the line. Why it disappeared for so long in the middle of the season, we have no idea, and that is something I still can't wrap my head around, whether it was just a load of injuries coming together. But in terms of getting figured out as such, I think there's more to be done within the landscape of it. Like, this is the 3-2, like with him inverting into midfield, that's a basic structure. That is just something to work within. So once that's nailed down and we know that's where we're going to go, then the little intricate details that you can start to add within that framework, that can change. So if he was to stay with this and how it's working now, yes, it might not work like that every single week, and it might not look as brilliant as it has, because we've been so used to a certain way, and then we've suddenly changed to this, and we're so happy because we've all been crying out for it. But I do think come next season, you can start to work on it slightly more, and you can start to put little intricate details into it. And I would be happy with him staying next season. But I stand with what I've said before, in the sense that for me, Pochettino he's the bridge manager. He, even as good as this has looked in the last few weeks, I do think that his level and his end goal with this Chelsea team is to maybe get another cup final, but essentially to get us back to like top 4, and then to hand it over to a better manager. Not even necessarily a better manager, but a manager that's more suited to the group as a collective. So I'm happy with what he's done. I've said it all season. I think what he's done with certain aspects of the players, I'm actually quite happy with, in terms of like Madueke, like Palmer's obviously been brilliant. That's probably not much down to Pochettino, but I'm broadly happy with the job he's doing, and with on the development side of things, and bridging the gap from one to the other in terms of from last season to 2025. Yeah. So that's sort of where I'd put it right now.
Obviously, guys, you can see Pys has joined us, so we'll get to Pys in just a second. I want to follow up one more question on this, Conor. I brought up here just Cucurella's stats against Spurs, even though obviously our overall performance was arguably better against West Ham, but obviously West Ham may just be a lot worse than Spurs as well. But my question on this is how much, and this is just your opinion, there's not really a factual answer to this, but how much of this system working as well as it has so instantaneously do you put down to Cucurella's individual strengths and abilities? Because that's the difficult part for me, because it's I don't know, maybe I'm being naive and maybe I don't get the structure as much as I should, but for me it's a bit simple. Okay, you build in a 3-2 and all of a sudden all your problems are gone, because I feel like if that was the solution, I feel like as much as I have my issues with Poch, I feel like if it was that simple, that would have happened a lot sooner. Especially Levi Colwill played left back at the beginning of the season. Now, the way we deployed it was as an actual left back, not part of a back three. But you literally already played it. Essentially, you had it right there. All you needed to do was use Colwill as a left centre back rather than a left back, and let Gusto push. And then you essentially would have had the exact shape we play right now. But obviously, I know it wasn't quite used that way. But even still, we were galaxies away from what we did in the last two games. So my only question is, if you just put Enzo in there, or people are talking about put Gusto in there, or put Reece James in there when he's fit, do you think, would it work as well? Or does Cucurella bring something that is actually really important for this position that not everyone has?
I think it would work differently is what is the key word to use, but I don't as well, maybe not, but in different ways I think it could. It's Enzo, in my opinion, when he comes back in, is going to feed into this really well. I think the fact that we're sustaining possession higher up the pitch, that's going to be good for Enzo, not bad for him. So the fact he's been out and like people are almost painting it with I think it's a lazy narrative to suggest that Enzo Fernandez leaves the side and all of a sudden we're better. I don't agree with that at all. But I think Cucurella, the qualities that he does bring in that, like coming into midfield, is he's an aggressive front foot defender, and having him, Caicedo and Gallagher all in the middle of the pitch, the amount of times we win second balls and duels, if you just look at their duel numbers, I mean, even on screen, what you've got there, 4 tackles. If you look at their duel numbers over the last 3 or 2.5 games.
And in that game, he had 9 out of 9 duels as well.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, just their capabilities to be around in close proximity and duel with each other in the counter press and just press together. It also now means if Caicedo does press out and he does see a trigger that he can go win the ball like he did for Jackson's 5th against West Ham, Cucurella is there to protect him. You've got somebody else there now. Whereas at the start of the season, when Enzo and Gallagher were both being asked to push high in the half space, if Caicedo pressed, then all of a sudden you've got an island of space between the defence and the attack. And I think that's also important to say with the defenders. I think lately, due to this, I don't think it's just Cucurella inverting. I also think the defenders have been told to be a lot more aggressive, because you're now seeing Badiashile pretty much pushing past the halfway line to win his duels in and around the middle of the pitch. And I think it's a fine line between the connection between the two, because if Cucurella and Caicedo do push, the defenders have to push. They can't be naive and think, oh, we need to back off just in case we get bypassed.
Isn't it also funny that happened with Thiago Silva in the team, when the whole world tried to tell me for the last year the reason we're not playing a high line is Thiago Silva? So that is quite funny to me. But it's still an interesting one. Pys, I'll take it to you now. First of all, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it, bro. We haven't had you on a stream in a little while, so I can't remember the last time it was. So I will just ask you the question and speak about this a little before we get into the breaking Estevao Willian news. We will get into it, ladies and gentlemen. Do not worry. But Pys, where do you stand on the revelation that has been Marc Cucurella? Because, and I said it before, I'm not in the camp that thinks now all of a sudden Poch should stay. But I am in a camp that if we play the last 3 games to a similar level to the last 2, that with the options available to us from the managerial market, I'm like, maybe we are just simply better off sticking with that now that he has done something. Now, this doesn't negate all the other issues that we've had with Poch, and it also doesn't negate the question, why on earth has it taken this long to get here? But it still happened. And like I said to Conor before you joined, Pys, I would feel like a bit of a hypocrite if I've been asking for tactical changes for the whole season, and then he does it, and then my whole response is, why so late? You know, I need to also give credit if I ask for something. But where do you stand on it? Because it's been unbelievable quite how much it's changed. It's obviously, like Conor said, like you just had it, it's not purely Cucurella quite on his own, but it almost feels like that, doesn't it, Pys? So before we get into, does it save Poch's job? Does it? What else do we do? Just on Cucurella and the tactical change, where do you stand on it? And like, honestly, bro, how much has it surprised you quite how well this has worked? Obviously, I think most of us have seen at some point through the second half against Villa, hold up, what's Cucurella doing in midfield? And obviously then the last two games happen. And honestly, especially against Villa and then against Spurs, I'm like, how on earth has this happened? But still, my question is still, how on earth has this been there the whole season? And instead I saw Cole on left back and Chilwell on the left wing and Cucurella rotting on the bench. I just don't know. But yeah, Pys, where do you stand on it?
Yeah, good to be back on having a chat. Has not been it has been a while, because it hasn't been a while, but it has. But yeah, this Cucurella stuff is it's surprising in a way, but not, if you get what I mean. Like, if you had told me, maybe it's just because I don't study as much tactics or care too much about it. I'm not intelligent enough, but if someone told me, no, but if someone told me, well, Cucurella could play inverted midfield, and you could kind of, basically, if you showed me this could happen before it happened, I'd be like, okay, yeah, that's believable, because Cucurella's good on the ball, he's good in tight spaces, he's got a really good touch, he's quite intelligent. So I could kind of see it happening. And you've seen, defenders, fullbacks invert into midfield before, but I don't think as on a, like this with Cucurella seems to be on such an occasion where it's like almost constantly, right? So it's not like a little moment throughout the game. It's like the whole game when we have the ball, and it's really interesting to see what's happened here. I think, Pochettino's press comments was interesting in sort of suggesting that actually he needed to build the competitive side of the team first. He needed to do that before he implemented tactics. Obviously, I disagree with that. I think the first thing you implement is tactics, because that's how you develop players. That's how players get better. But I also do see a part of it where he wants to give the players more freedom of expression. He wants to let, the players express themselves a little bit more, playing roles that they want to. So maybe that's why we've seen so much of this basketball-style football this season, rather than sort of tactics, as you will, and controlling games, which I want to see. So, I mean, it's a hard thing for me to judge, because for me it's too late in the season to go to like, oh, I'm Poch now, because I'm 100% guaranteed he's going to implement all these crazy tactics. Let's get to pre-season. I'm really excited. I just don't know with him, and that element of uncertainty is really what I don't like, that he's left it so late on in the season to sort of go, okay, I'm going to try something now, and something that's clearly worked, and it's clearly a good tactic. Because I was at the West Ham game. That it was absolutely brilliant. Honestly, you could see it in front of your own eyes. It was so clear what was happening, and it just worked really, really well. It really helped us with the build-up. Really helped us with the control of the game, and it just offered something different. It's something different that other teams haven't seen from us before as well this season. So I think it's worked really well. I think it will continue for the rest of the season, but. Everyone's saying about Cucurella and how brilliant he is, and he has been really good. He's probably on the sell list in the summer anyway. So it's another thing to consider where, if we do this in the future, who else can do this? Because I think Chilwell's probably going to be staying, and we're probably going to be signing a new left back. So as much as this is nice, this may be short-lived.
That is the next problem I have with it, right? Because, like, people know I've certainly defended Chilwell more than, say, for example, you have, Pys. But his injuries alongside Cucurella's kind of rise in form, if then the club still sit there and say we choose to sell Cucurella over Chilwell, the only logic to that is, well, Cucurella's recent form will make it more likely to find suitors for him, while Ben Chilwell has been injured essentially permanently since 2021. So how likely are you really to be able to sell him? So that is maybe an issue. But you know what? I'm not sure if everybody sees it that way, but I think what we're seeing with Marc Cucurella right now should tell everyone that everything you've ever thought, other than if you're maybe someone like Conor who thinks about football a bit to a deeper level, But everything you've ever thought about that player is good enough, player is not good enough, has been proven wrong. Because this is proof that when a player is not used to their strengths, they can look absolutely horrendous. Because until this second half of the season, I know this wasn't until this tactical change, but still, until the second half of the season, until Cucurella came back from his injury, Cucurella 9 times out of 10, with maybe, for example, the exception of that Dortmund Champions League second leg under Potter last year, Cucurella was almost always, in terms of a rating, between a 3 out of 10 to maximum a 6 out of 10, other than that Dortmund game, I would say. And now you've looked at him for the last 2.5 games and you're like, oh my God, like he's probably been our best player every time. Like in terms of most influential player, at least, if you want to call it that. So that, and I think when people talk about, Enzo is not good enough, or even myself sometimes, even though I've never said Caicedo will never be good enough, but so far has been good enough. Or when you talk about Mudryk, or when you talk about God knows how many other players from other teams, this is proof that how they're used matters. And it's not just a player is either good or they're not. No, that's not as simple as it is. Ask Marc Cucurella about that. But I think there's huge news. We'll talk about how this Cucurella situation, the tactical change, will potentially affect the managerial situation in a minute. But quite major news has come out just before we went live here. Chelsea have reached a verbal agreement with Estevao. I can't even speak anymore. Estevao Willian Estevao. I feel like his name is flipped around whichever way they want sometimes. Told initial bid still to be sent, but it will be around 32 million euros plus add-ons, as talks with Palmeiras will follow. Nothing done yet, but Chelsea remain clear favourites since January. And let me just quickly top that up with another tweet that Pys has put out about this very topic. Estevao accepts Chelsea project. Add-ons included. Chelsea's idea is to bid even higher than his release clause, which lies at 47 million pounds. I think 60 million euros, if I'm not mistaken. Pys, what's happening? Just to clarify to people, Estevao Willian is 17 years old. He would, or is he still only 16? Well, anyways, he would only join us in 2025, just like Henry Paez would. He's also a left-footed right winger. Now, obviously, these guys can't only play on the right wing. They can play number 10. They can play on the left wing. But still, where do we stand on this? Because I think Clear Lake have kind of just ruined us, because this guy, from everything I've gathered, right, and I'm certainly no expert on 17-year-old Brazilians, thank God, but from everything that I have gathered, he seems like an actual wonder kid. You know how many times we've talked about, wonder kid here, wonder kid there. No, he actually seems like a wonder kid. So I want to be excited about this, but the amount of youth signings we have made makes it difficult for me to be excited about this. So, Pys, tell us what you know about him, what you know about the deal, and where you stand on it.
Yeah, I think this is basically our revenge for Endrick. I think this is our Endrick. And I remember at the time, funnily enough, it was hilarious because I remember when Real Madrid signed Endrick, I follow one of the Brazilian accounts, and he was like, he posted a comp of this kid, Estevao, and he was like, this guy's the next up. He's, arguably even better than Endrick as like a player, like in terms of skills and stuff like that, dribbling. And I remember I clicked on this because PSG had a bid rejected for him, quite a big bid a few months ago. And I remember watching this comp and I was like, fucking hell, this kid seems insane. Like his dribbling was just outrageous. And, you know, a few months later, Todd Boehly and Bedad have come in and we're signing him. So I find it quite funny. But yeah, I mean, he does seem like, as you say, he does seem like a wonder kid. He does seem like a ridiculous talent. Funnily enough, I think Relevo in Spain that are really reliable, and the Spanish report from The Athletic basically implied that Real Madrid would have got him as well if it wasn't for the agent, because the agent doesn't have a good relationship with Real Madrid's chief scout. So, him and Endrick could have been linking up at Real Madrid. But, this is the fun part of the project, right? This is the long-term hope. It's that, kids like this come in and you just think, holy shit, like this kid's insane. Thank God we signed him. When he's 20, he's going to be a world beater, like a Musiala, Mbappe, on like that stardom level. That's what we're trying to find. And we've got that with Henry Paez as well. So I have no doubts that one of these guys, that because we're signing so many, one of them is going to be an absolute world beater, I'm sure, because our scouting is really good. It's just like, how quickly do they make it? What is the plan for them? And I think that's the negative side of the project, because I think if you've seen right now, everyone's hyped about Amari Hutchinson, everyone's hyped about Angelo, but we've got Noni Madueke, we've got Cole Palmer, we've got other players that can play on the right hand side. So it's going to be interesting to see, because this kid will join us in 2025. If he gets a loan, I mean, we're spending so much money. I think Pai is a little bit different, but we're spending so much money on Estevao that it's like it almost seems like a first team squad player straight away, even if he's 18, because he seems to be that level of investment. And Fab said that we've worked.
That's the part that worries me a little bit. You know how you said earlier, that's the fun part of this project, about the future hope, right? My worry is when that is the situation, in terms of you sign someone like him and he will be 18 when he joins us, and like you say, for the fee, you're maybe not starting every game, but you'd certainly expect him to be in the first team immediately. And then you're like, isn't that in and of itself the problem? That what if we're still somewhere between 5th and 10th? And then you bring in this kid who everybody's talking about is the next Messi, the next Neymar, the actual new wonder kid. And that pressure coming in, now you need to deliver. And actually, not only are you now at Chelsea, which is a big club, but also you are at the failing Chelsea. And you are now the kid that is supposed to take us back to the top. That's the part I worry about. If we are back halfway secure, back in the Champions League, say finishing top 4 next season, when they join and when they are allowed to play again, fine. But if we're still bad and these kids come in and they're almost like the guys to save us, then I'm a little bit worried about how that's going to go. I'm not sure how you stand on it. Yeah. Just answer me that quickly and then I'll go to Conor.
Yeah, I mean, I can see your point, but I think probably, I mean, I don't know if he'll go out on loan first, but if he goes out on loan, it's one of them that maybe it's a smart idea because, as much as you spend on him, you want to get him acclimatized to somewhere out of South America. Maybe the same will be for Kendrick Pies. Maybe this money is a long-term investment. I know some people have talked about how, I don't know anything about this, but supposedly Chelsea have like a Project Wonder Kid fund, and then there's like a main fund for the first team signings. I don't actually know how, because for me, we're under financial fair play constraints, and we're just, here we go. I know it's only I think it's 28 mil base fee that we're bidding, and the add-ons go up to 50 mil supposedly, but obviously they might be like the Mudryk ones where you win the Premier League or you win the Golden Boot, you know what I mean? So, or you win the assist award or whatever, or you know what I mean? So maybe it's like that. So maybe it's not as much as we're actually thinking, but it's still £30 million on a 17-year-old. So it's like, one, where's this money coming from? And two, it's like, when does this stop? That's
it's also an interesting question about when is this money getting paid, right? Because so much over the last 18 months as Chelsea fans, we've had to, acquaint ourselves with the term amortization, right? Like, how does this even get amortized if he officially only has a contract next year? Like, even though we're buying him now, won't he only be on the books next year when his contract starts? Because that's at least what the whole amortization stuff has taught me, that essentially the on the book numbers of signings is kind of tied to their contract. So if his contract only officially starts next year, then aren't we making a signing even though we're signing him now? I think we're only paying that next year, but I could be wrong. Like, I'm not quite sure how this works out, because I'm sure Palmeiras won't be like, yeah, you can sign him now, but it's fine. Pay us next year. I'm pretty sure they want some sort of money now. So I don't really know how this will work out in the accounts, but hey, it's the stuff. And the only thing I almost don't like is what you said earlier, Pice, in terms of that he's like almost revenge for Endrick, because Endrick is a striker. Like, you shouldn't, like, if the logic is like, okay, we've got this super striker, and now we're like, okay, now we're signing this super winger because we couldn't get the super striker. I'm like, yeah, but doesn't that in and of itself show that why? Like, you know what I mean? Like, we've already signed the super winger. A super striker would have made sense. Another super winger, I have a few question marks there. Conor, I'll finally come back to you. I'm not expecting you to have all sorts of insane knowledge on Estevao Willian. But from what you do know, first of all, what do you think? And also, where do you stand on the... I mean, you and me touched on it just before we went live. How many more right-footed left-wingers do we want, man?
Yeah, I think the thing with this one is, and I've said this, I tweeted this as well a couple of weeks ago when the rumours started to come out. I think this is a talent that is almost just too good to not get. It's in the same way as I thought that about Paez. I think these are players that you have to just go and get because they are just that level of their ceiling is just that high. But the issue with that then comes, like we said before, let me just bring somebody out like a Washington, who I actually do think's, again, got a decent level of talent. I don't think he very much could make it and be decent, but I didn't know much about Washington before he joined. And when he did join, like I said, I think he's got some good traits, but you spent 18 million on him and you've not seen him at all. So I think if those ones didn't exist,
from what I've heard, even when he plays for the under 21s, he doesn't look particularly special.
A few of the games I've seen, he's been okay. I think, ridiculously special, definitely not, like from what I've seen, but like in terms of how he's looked so far, I'm not saying he will never be, but what I've seen of him, he's been about average in those games. He's had some like good touches, he's got some good traits, like I said, but I think if those buys didn't exist, these ones wouldn't matter as much, and people would be a little bit more forgiving of them, because they're few and far between, and they're the ones that make sense, like Paez did. And now people are starting to see with the highlight reels that are coming out of Paez and in his games, is just like he's just ridiculously good. And if you actually go ahead and watch the whole games, it's not even just what he does in the highlights. He's just a brilliant footballer. Same as Estevao. I just think he's got such a high ceiling, he's got such a high level. Like we said as well, though, with the left-footed wingers, I think that's where you run into a little bit of an issue. But then my other thoughts on that is, again, as you said earlier, they can play different positions. Palmer, I think, was bought as more of a 10 long term. Paez, I think, is more of a 10 personally than a winger. Estevao is definitely a right winger. That is where he'd play. Angelo actually played quite a lot on the left this year for Strasbourg. I think he's better off the right, but I think he's played quite a lot on the left this year. The games I watched, remember when I was doing some work on Strasbourg, he was playing off the left, and he was fairly decent there. So I think he could play there. Hutchinson can definitely play in any of the three positions. Again, probably best off the right, but I think 10, been brilliant for Ipswich in the 10 this year, has played a few games off the left. So yes, you've got a lot of right-footed left wingers. Obviously, Madueke, I haven't even mentioned, who I think's been our second best player in these last 2-4 games. Yeah, well, that's what I mean. Cole Palmer, at least in my opinion, I think he's been better this season off the right, but I think long term you do turn him into the 10 long term. But yeah, I think I agree. We've got a lot of those types of players.
You know what my worry is on that? Like and people say they're so talented, they'll be good whether they play left wing or right wing. And then I think, okay, fair enough. But imagine if Eden Hazard, because he also had Neymar at this club, instead of playing left wing his entire career, played right wing all of his career. Would he have still been great? Absolutely. Would he have been as great? I don't think so. Because I also think Willian, if we didn't have Eden Hazard, would have probably been 2-3 times the player at Chelsea had he been allowed to play on the left all his career. Because also at Brazil, obviously, he had Neymar and Vinicius on the left, so he always had to play on the right everywhere he was. But you could see it, the second he was on the left, he was so much better, like so much more dangerous in every way. Now, sure, he had a few things that he could do better on the right, but I feel like, wouldn't that apply to these guys as well? Like, sure, maybe they are even more talented than Willian, but like I say, if I imagine Hazard having to play on the right for his whole career, yeah, it would have still been great, but I don't think as great. I don't know how you see that, though.
No, yeah, I do agree with that. But I think it just comes down to the point, decisions will have to be made, and in what order they're made is where it would all crumble or all make sense. Does Madueke solidify himself by the time these guys come in? If not, they're probably going to look to move him on for money, look to move him on for at least a similar fee that they got him for. Same with Hutchinson. Will he get a new deal in the summer? Will they try to get a new deal, loan him, and then maybe move him on if these guys come in? Payet, like I said, I think he's a 10 personally. I wouldn't even consider, I would consider him playing on the wing, like as a one-offs, but for me, he is a 10. That is where he will play. And that's his best position. So Angelo as well, when does he come back? Probably gets another loan next year. Again, he's one that I rate him really highly, but I wouldn't be surprised if they look to almost flip him because of these other talents that they've had the chance at getting. If we didn't get an Estevao, maybe Angelo would have been the long-term solution on that side. Now that they can get an Estevao, maybe they start to already look at, can we get what we got for Angelo? Can we maybe get that back in 2 years after another loan? So again, I think the timing of these decisions is going to be very important, and how they're made. Like I said with Madueke, he probably has another year to basically consistently deliver the performances that he has been, and I've been very impressed with him. For me, our second best player in the last 2.5 games behind Cucurella. I think he's been that good, but he needs to deliver that consistently if he's going to keep his spot there with the amount of talent that's coming through in that position. So it's very much a timing thing, and I do agree that stockpiling them can hamper their development. So hopefully they know that and they won't stockpile. They'll look to move them on in different ways, whether that's loans or trying to get profit out of the players that they decide, or they deem to be the less talented or the less likely to make it at the club. But that's a time thing we're going to have to see.
Exactly that. And obviously another thing to think about and remember when thinking about these types of players is also that we have a multi-club model. Now, as of today, only 2 clubs, Chelsea and Strasbourg, are part of that multi-club model, but there will be more. And obviously, we'll talk about that a little bit later on in terms of with Thiago Silva, and we're definitely doing stuff in Brazil and South America as well. But I do think there will be at least 1, maybe 2 more European clubs as well. And then, well, it's fine. Like, it's all well and good to have 3 or 4 left-footed right wingers, but if you have 3 or 4 clubs, in theory, that doesn't really stop you, I guess. What will be interesting is whether we will move them around within the clubs, like not only as loans, but as transfers. Because, like, you know, what you're talking about, when Chelsea need to flip money, theoretically, we could obviously purchase a player from Chelsea via Strasbourg. Then in the meantime, that helps Chelsea's books. And then in 2 years, when the player's value has increased, then Strasbourg sell them, because Strasbourg will then also need to look after their financial rules, right, and not breach those. So it's an interesting one. I will read out Derek's super chat here. Appreciate it very much. He also said later, sorry for the typos. Don't worry, bro. Appreciate it a lot. He says, would love these kids, especially players, not to go on loan and develop here. Doesn't need to start week in, week out, but we should control their development, should control his development. Where do you stand on that, Pice? Because obviously with our squad being this young now, you could argue, well, if you can start 21-year-olds, you can have 18-year-olds on the bench. And I agree with that. At the same time, I don't really want us to permanently only have 21-year-olds starting. So it's a tough one. I do like Derek's point, though, in the sense of him saying that we control their development. Because when you look at even Broja to Fulham right now, like, what a terrible loan that was. I know we're getting £750,000 out of it. Fucking brilliant. Do you know what I mean? But, like, Mudryk has not been in great form recently. Sterling has not been used and injured. So if Broja stayed, there's a chance that Jackson might have played left winger part of this recent part of the season, and Broja might have played up front. Which, would he have been great? No, probably not, because I think we're all kind of coming to the realization, or have realized before, that he's not quite good enough. But would it have been better than sitting on the bench at Fulham? Yes, it would have been. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, from that perspective, controlling that development, I do see the point, but only if it's the right manager to develop them. So where do you stand on Derek's comment here? And in terms of players, in terms of Estevao Willian, would you personally want them to be loaned out, whether that's within our multi-club model or elsewhere? Or do you think they should, like, stay and be developed at Chelsea?
I think it depends on the individual player, to be honest. Like, I think if you've got someone that you deem special, I mean, from what I see, I'm very excited for Kendry Paez. I think it depends on the year, you know, it depends on the current squad. I think, you know, if you need, like, for example, if you have a Palmer who's playing more of a number 10 and you need a right winger, then put Estevao in the squad, you know, for the season after next, you know, why not? So I think if they're deemed to be that level of good and talented, I think there's no problem having them in a first team, especially if we have Europe in that season, you know, because we'll have, you know, I mean, maybe even Champions League group stages off the bench. If it's Europa League, who knows? Like, I think the comment that Derek says very much depends on the season and the situation, I think, of the squad, of the manager, like, so many variables to it, I think. But, you know, with some of them, like Conor said, like David Washington, for example, I think, well, if you think back to when we signed him, he was not even starting for Santos. Like, this is a different level of talent here, right? This is someone that PSG and Real Madrid wanted, and Real Madrid would probably have if obviously the thing I mentioned with the scout and the relationship didn't mess it up. So
I mean, you mentioned Real Madrid and PSG. Apparently, also like what Man United and Bayern were interested or are interested. Like, everyone wants him.
Yeah, Barca as well. I know someone that runs a big Barca account, and he says, yeah, like they've been looking at him for ages, but they don't have the finances to even do a deal. So, you know, they signed that Vitor Roque instead, you know, for a little bit of money. So I think
we were linked with him as well at some point last summer, weren't we?
Yeah, we was. So for me, it's like I'm excited about him and Paez. I mean, there's a few others. I think Andre Santos may creep into the squad at some stage, but in terms of controlling loans, I think we have to do better with that, because if I don't have the time to do it, but I'm sure if you went through all of our loans so far and sort of gauged how successful they are, I don't think I don't think many of them would be, in my opinion.
Yeah, I hear that point, and also Fire Red makes a reasonable point in saying, because obviously the super chat was about we should look to develop them here to be in control of the development. But he says, but look at Washington, how well we are developing him. I know Connor spoke about it, but would David Washington have been better off somewhere on loan, a good loan where he would have actually played? But yeah, he would have, because 95% of this season he's not even played for the under-21s. He's just sat on the bench for the first team. 99% of the games unused. Like, sure, it's all sorts of great experience, but we all know playing is more important than great experience of sitting on the bench. I do quickly want to just highlight this comment here by Crispy from a little bit earlier. You're saying these purchases are not meant to help us win trophies, they're meant to maximize profit. I think you need to, everyone, all of us, need to learn to differentiate a little bit. It's like, for some of them, in my opinion, someone like David Washington, maybe even your Ugochukwus, maybe a few others, right? They are absolutely in that category, and you're right, Crispy. But I don't think Estevao Willian or Kendrick Perez are in that category. Now, sure, if you get both and you're like, okay, they're both the super talents, but as everyone that follows football knows, not every super talent makes it into a superstar. You know, if you have two super talents, that you have a bigger likelihood that at least one of them will make it into a superstar. Do you know what I mean? But I don't think this is the type of purchase that is meant to maximize profits. At least from my perspective, I think you agree with that as well, Pys. But yeah, it's an interesting one. It's exciting, but it's just a bit of like I don't know, man. Like, makes me feel like a bit of a cuck. Like, what do you mean? Like, sign all these great players and now I'm getting to see them in 2 years? Brilliant. Do you know what I mean? Like, what do you mean? We're shit now. Give me good players now, not in 2 years. It's all well and good in 2 years, but God, could be dead in 2 years, for all we know. Do you know what I mean? 2 years. I know it's not 2 years, but it's in like not next season, but the season starting in summer 2025. But yeah, it's still big news though. It's still big news. Pys, I assume you also don't quite know as of today when like payments will have to be made and stuff, because like I said earlier, will this count on our books next year? Will it count on our books now? I honestly don't know.
No, I don't know either on that. All I got told on this deal was, I think last week, that, you know, Chelsea were talking to the agent, and the current issue back then was game time. Chelsea were trying to convince his agent and him on game time, and since then we've agreed terms. So I guess there's some sort of plan in place.
There you go. I want to bring up another, topic that kind of surrounds Brazil, because might as well. We are talking about a Brazilian. Thiago Silva's move to Fluminense has has been confirmed. He will join Fluminense in the summer, where he will actually face Chelsea in the 2025 Club World Cup if he is still there by then. But the Fluminense president has apparently put forward the idea to Chelsea of playing 2 friendly matches in the future to celebrate the Thiago Silva negotiations, a game in London and a game in the 73,000-seater Maracanã Stadium. The president of Fluminense says he has become a Chelsea fan. Obviously, this isn't the biggest news in the world, other than that it would be quite cool to see Chelsea playing probably the most iconic football stadium in the world, the Maracanã, obviously. But what I think is much more positive about this is just a sign of building connections. And, if we want to avoid missing out on things like Endrick in the future, having good connections to, well, one of the biggest clubs in Brazil for sure in Fluminense, but multiple with Palmeiras now with this Estevao Willian stuff, that is a positive. Like, as much as these owners have done bad things, creating good relationships in places where the best talents have always come from, like Brazil, that can only be a good thing. And in general, like I said, how great would it be to see Chelsea play at the Maracanã? I don't know how you feel about it, but sounds quite good to me. Other thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, this was actually a lucky find for me, because I was just stumbling across Thiago Silva because I was trying to find his because obviously the end of the season awards. I don't know if we're going to talk about that, but I was looking for the clip because he was crying at the end of season awards, and then I saw something from the Globo, who's a massive source in Brazil. So thought I'd click on it because it was something about what the president said. So I found this, and I think it would be really cool. I think the president as well seemed to love us from the quotes. There was quite a lot of quotes. I think they did like a live or something, an Instagram live with Silva, and I think the source like translated it. So it was good to see. It was like, the president was like, I've become a massive Chelsea fan. Like apparently Fluminense's roots or something are English somehow. So they really liked the fact that they could get like such an iconic Brazilian legend back and stuff like this. And they praised how well Chelsea handled negotiations. They said they didn't cause us any trouble and it was really quick and smooth. So,
I mean, his contract ran out, so I'm not really sure what negotiations had to take place.
I don't know, but it was like, we want to celebrate the negotiations, the deal by doing 2 friendlies and stuff like this. I think the only problem that they said was that, I don't know if Chelsea said this, but the calendar issue between the fixtures and the seasons is like really different. So I think that it was apparently going to be like hard to sort out, but this was definitely something that they put forward to the Chelsea board, I think, when they were talking.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, obviously, we do hold, at least so far, our preseasons in the US. Now, you could say, oh, it's America. I mean, look up the flights from the US to Brazil. It's some distance. But then again, we also fly about from LA to Orlando, which that ain't much further than it is from Orlando, for example, down to Brazil. So at that point, hey, chuck one in at America now. Why not? I'd be down. Let's get through a couple of smaller pieces of news that have come out in the last couple of days before we get into more of the tactical and the managerial stuff, because that is still very interesting. You've mentioned it there earlier, Conor, in terms of Omari Hutchinson. Obviously, he's had an absolutely phenomenal season at Ipswich, helping them secure promotion, in particular in the second half of the season. Scored some absolute wildies, that kid. What a player he seems to be. Obviously, Ipswich now getting promoted screams the opportunity. Loan him there again. It's not a new loan. He knows the environment. Should be a much quicker process to settle. But then you look at the Premier League table this season, and the Premier League table many times recently. Promoted teams very often end up getting relegated again. So do you want to send him to a club where the likelihood of him getting relegated again is quite big, or would you try to get him to a bigger club? I don't know. Obviously, Simon Johnson from The Athletic has said here as well, Chelsea have asked Omari Hutchinson to return to Cobham next week. Omari will join training so Pochettino can watch him, and there will be discussions over his next step. But Simon Johnson also said that with us needing to, sell to help comply with profit and sustainability rules of the Premier League and find new signings at the same time, saying essentially there is a possibility that we could sell Hutchinson to the highest bidder. Where do you stand on that, Conor? Because for me, it's like, if you need to make money right now and someone really wants to sign someone like Hutchinson, fine, do that. Just fucking make sure you put a buyback clause in there. Problem solved. Like, really, it's quite simple. Like, we have all these youngsters now. You can sell half of them with a buyback clause again. If it's a reasonable buyback clause, not a problem. Obviously, for the most part, whether you think of Dominic Solanke, whether you think of Livramento, whether you think of, there's probably a few more, of players that we had, loaned them out or sold them with buyback clauses, but buyback clauses that we never end up made use of. But do you think Omari Hutchinson is quite so good that we shouldn't even risk selling with a buyback clause just in case we don't end up, taking it?
I really like Hutchinson, so I'm on the... I wouldn't want him to go. I'd much rather a contract be figured out this summer and then another loan goes through. Again, like you said with the Ipswich one, I'd send him to Ipswich if McKenna stays. If he doesn't, then I would replace him somewhere else. I'd put him even take him to Strasbourg just for a different atmosphere, or somewhere in the Premier League mid-table. It's one of the two. Or if McKenna stays, then I would definitely send him to Ipswich. But I think he's...
This guy says, I'm not going to try to butcher his name, send him to a mid-table club, but wait, aren't we one? So you might as well keep him, to be fair.
He is good. He is very good. I genuinely think if you kept him around the squad next season, he would find his way in. I genuinely
think if you kept him around the squad this season, he'd probably have managed to get himself game time.
I agree. Yeah, definitely. So, especially right now with the injury we've had.
Exactly that. Now, this is a super difficult question, and obviously I'm fully expecting you to speculate, and I understand this is not a foregone conclusion. But when you compare Hutchinson to, where does Hutchinson in your mind stand compared to Estevao Willian, compared to Pyes? Is there like a big gap talent-wise, or is he like, I'm not saying you're saying he's the next Messi, but, is he in that realm, or is he on a slightly different level below that?
No, he is below that realm, and like I said, I do really like Hutchinson. So there's no feat against him, but those two speaking about Pyes and Estevao, they are they have the generational. That's a big word to throw around, but they have that ceiling. Whereas for me, Hutchinson, he has the ceiling of being a high quality very good Premier League winger, but I don't think he's like a world beater. I think I do think he's very good, but I'd put him in terms of ceiling, I'd put him quite a way below those two, but I still do think he's very, very good. I'm not trying to like.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I mean, Max added a quite interesting question. Where would you put Hutchinson in comparison to Madueke when it comes to talent? Would you put him above Madueke?
Again, that's tough because I think in terms of ceiling, I think I would, but in terms of ready-made now, I think Madueke.
Well, he's what? Hutchinson's only 18, right? So he's like 3 years younger. So you'd expect him to not be at the same level, but purely.
And I do also really like Madueke. I do really think he has a lot to offer, and I really hope that he now takes this chance to step on and just continue doing exactly what he's been doing the last few games, because I think he's been really, really good. And I do like Madueke. I do think he sometimes is a bit one-dimensional, but I think even then he's working on that. He's becoming very good at like that move coming in on his left foot. He's really good at that, and he's getting better at going down attacking the byline as well. So I think there's a level above for Madueke to go to as well. But I think if I had to rate their ceilings, I'd probably put Hutchinson just above. But it's this close between those two.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we have actually forgot Diegsy, good old Diegsy, Diego Moreira. I'm not sure if he's left-footed as well, but he's certainly a right winger as well. So another one. Fantastic. Pais, I'll come to you. Where do you stand on this Hutchinson situation? I'm not asking you to like, do you know, are we trying to sell him? But just to clarify for people as well, the reason Hutchinson is on his is going into the last year of his contract with next season is because we signed him from Arsenal as a free agent at 16, but at 16 you're not allowed to give longer than 2-year contracts. So that's why he only signed a 2-year contract. And in an ideal world, you'd bloody hope we give him a new contract now. But yeah, that's why, like, you know, obviously comparison to everybody else, we gave everybody else a 7-8 year contract and Hutchinson has 2. So when I first heard about it, I'm like, but why? And then I learned, at 16, you're only allowed to give out 2-year contracts. So that's why. But yeah, Pais, where do you stand on that? Do you think that will happen? Do you think that should happen? Do you think sell him, but with a buyback clause? Where do you stand on the Hutchinson situation?
I'd like to give him a chance next season if there's space. I think if you, I mean, I know probably we're going to get Conference League at least, I hope, by finishing 7th. But, you know, in a case where we didn't get Europe and we completely mess up the last 3 games or whatever, and we only have Palmer and Madueke realistically, or we have them two as the sort of right wingers, I probably wouldn't keep Hutchinson because I don't think he'd play much. I think
when you say better. Keep, does that mean just at the club, or does that mean you'd be willing to sell rather than loan?
No, so if we get Europe, I would keep him because I think he'll play a bit. But if we don't get Europe, I would loan him. Okay. But if you want my personal opinion, this one stinks of a sale. I can't lie, it stinks because I think from what I've heard, Hutchinson has a really good head on his shoulders, meaning that he's not dumb. He knows that, you know, like he left Arsenal because of game time, right? I think so. I mean, I don't want to be negative, but I could see a situation where he doesn't agree a new deal because
it doesn't help that we've just agreed.
Like how can we
Willian for him? Does it?
Like one thing we seem to be good at is like promising the future to all these talents, but you know he seems like he left Arsenal, big decision to come to Chelsea. Like he seems to have a good head on his shoulders. From what I've heard, he's quite smart. So I wouldn't be surprised if he just says, "No, I'm not signing this new contract. You can't guarantee me game time at the moment. I want to go back to Ipswich." And then Chelsea are like, well, because Chelsea will do this. Chelsea will be like, well, if you're not signing a new contract, then we've got to sell you. And I think it may come to that. I think it may be like maybe Ipswich use some of that promotion money. I know Kieran McKenna said at his end of season awards, if you could get one birthday present, what would you give me for the owner? If you could tell the owner something, he was like, buy Hutchinson. So, I mean, this one doesn't fill me with optimism just because he's got 1 year left on his deal. I think if he had more years, we'd be fine. But
considering he's been at Arsenal until a year and a half ago, he's not exactly he's not like a Gallagher or a Chalobah that are attached to Chelsea and will have that as a reason to stay and just commit.
He's not afraid to make a big decision already. He's shown that.
Yeah,
so I mean,
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, from what I've seen from him at Ipswich, and also like what I've seen from him like speaking, seems like good kid, and I'm a fan. I've seen more of him than I have of like Estevao Willian and Payet. What I see of Payet are random clips on Twitter when he scores, and all of Chelsea Twitter always like shares his goals around, and obviously probably the same Estevao Willian compilations that most of us have seen. But yeah, there you go. It's certainly an interesting one. Let's put it that way. It's certainly an interesting one. Another piece of interesting potential transfer news, which has slightly changed my mind on what may or may not be possible, is the report from Di Marzio. And obviously, you will know better, Pies, whether this is something you tweeted it, so it can't be completely useless. But quite how much you believe in it is obviously a slightly different question. But anyway, the Di Marzio report states Osimhen prefers England over joining PSG as he already played for Lille. Osimhen comes over to England often during days off. Chelsea and Arsenal are the two options. I said that Napoli's director Mana is talking to Chelsea as he wants to include Lukaku. First of all, since when is it not De Laurentiis anymore doing Napoli's negotiations? Because that changes everything. But also, do they actually want Lukaku? Because I've had a couple of issues. You thought that Fabrizio denied that, did he? I didn't see that. But regardless, if they actually want Lukaku, it's almost too good to not do. Like, I have my issues with Osimhen. I'm like, he's very expensive. He's so expensive that I'm like, even if he wasn't in form, because of how much it cost, he'd still get played rather than, say, playing Jackson again, which is like, what's the whole point in this whole actually really good development season of Jackson if you're going to buy Osimhen and Jackson is either going to play left wing or not at all? So it's like, But if they want to take Lukaku off our hands and it makes getting Osimhen cheaper, my God, like you'd almost have to do it. I mean, Pies, I'll go with you first, but where do you stand on it and how much do you believe in this report, especially as JC said he thought Fabrizio denied? I'm not sure if you saw that too.
Yeah, so I'll give you the lowdown. A few days ago, I think Fabrizio Di Marzio came out with like this report. It was like sort of breaking news. Chelsea had apparently approached Napoli offering 80 to 90 million euros plus a young player, presumably on loan, plus Lukaku to get Osimhen. And apparently it was like the first contacts between clubs. But then Fabrizio came out 2 days later and denied that Chelsea had basically denied that any contact or negotiations were ongoing. So at that point, I was like, because Di Marzio doesn't really usually get Italian news wrong. And Fabrizio is very good on Chelsea news and just everything in general. So this came out like a couple of days later. So I was like, okay, I'm going to post it because, again, it's Di Marzio. Don't really know what's happening with this one. I did speak to someone and they basically said that this new director is briefing. Well, he believes he's briefing Di Marzio because he wants Lukaku, basically. So he's trying to get a deal going. And that De Laurentiis,
again, if that's the case, we've been trying to get rid of Lukaku for 2 years. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but the issue is like the guy that I spoke to was like, he believes that De Laurentiis is still in charge technically. Okay. So whether or not this new director goes to De Laurentiis and they discuss getting Lukaku, I mean, to be honest with you, I can't remember the last time a swap deal plus cash ever happened in a big deal. So I don't have any hopes for this, but yeah, there's some like background context.
But it could happen as two separate deals, obviously. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it could do, but
it's just like if they lose Osimhen, it does make sense that they want another big name striker. So,
sure, yeah.
And therefore, the whole Lukaku situation does make sense. He's been everywhere in Italy already. So what difference does it make if he adds another club? So, like I say, it's just, and also like how do they play nowadays? It's not quite the Sarri ball times anymore, is it, at Napoli? So would maybe even suit Lukaku because I mean, Conor, I'll take this one to you unless you wanted to add any more about the transfer story, Pies. I'll take this to you, Conor, because you're a big fan of Victor Osimhen, and you've done a video yourself. You've written articles about why you think Victor Osimhen is the guy to help Chelsea in the finishing striking department. And with you saying that, what I would like to know is what do you put it down to that his output has been not awful, but in comparison to last year's season, a lot worse. What do you put that down to? Is it just their managerial change? Is it like, because they won the league last season and now they're absolutely nowhere near. Now, again, they won that with Spalletti last year. And well, now I forget the name of their new manager. You will know. But yeah, what would you put these things down to? Because paying close or over 100 million for a player that's, first of all, had a lot of injuries, had not the best season right now, and has only had one super standout season in terms of numbers to justify such a crazy price tag. I assume a lot of people will be a little bit hesitant, but what makes you be so confident that Osimhen is the guy?
And I will just say straight away, I completely understand the hesitance, and I completely understand why, because we've done it before. So I completely get it, and I like that just makes sense. So I can't even argue that. The thing for me with the Osimhen deal is, and the other thing I want to say on it just before I speak about him particularly, is Jackson for me still plays a massive part, because I think Jackson's quality. I think he's class. I think he's been brilliant this season. I think he doesn't have enough. I mean, he's starting to get the credit he deserves, but I think he's been very good in this development season, like we were saying, his first season in the Prem. So I think he, no matter what, has a big part to play, whether it's off the left, whether it's playing up front as well. Maybe sometimes they play a two, but my point is, whatever it is, Jackson is a big part of it. So I want, like, that's like my clear opinion of it, is not to push Jackson away. But the reason I think Osimhen is the ceiling raiser in this team compared to other strikers is that he gives something that a lot of us that we don't have, that we've not had for a while, which is that bully mentality to really dominate the box, get touches in the box with his back on, with like back onto defenders, really bully players. His aerial presence is something we've not had in absolutely years. And I think, again, when you're playing against low blocks, which has been issues we've had in the past, he's the sort of player that unlocks a low block, because you're putting in multitudes of crosses, and he's the sort of player, he'll get on one of them, like when we used to with Giroud. But he just has that, in terms of that, he has those ceiling raising qualities for me. He provides so much. If you're going to mark Osimhen out again, you basically need two defenders. One defender's not enough. So then you start to find the spare man, and who's going to be that spare man for Chelsea? A lot of the time, it'll probably be Cole Palmer if he's in the 10. Then you start to get even better reaping rewards of it, even without Osimhen having to touch the ball. That's what I mean. Even without Osimhen having to touch the ball. So that's when you start to reap those benefits.
But do we want a striker that might not always touch the ball that much? Like, we've had that before. I feel like Chelsea have usually been, since Drogba, have usually been at their best when we've had a striker that gets involved, not had a striker that only gets the ball to score. That's, I'm not saying that never works, but at Chelsea, that's like, so often when we've had a striker like that, it ends up to them having the number 9 curse, not scoring, but they also don't see the ball a lot, and then all the fans lose their mind because they're like, you don't help in build up and you don't score. So that's always like, especially for the settling in period when there's big price tag, big pressure, and then if you're the type of striker that waits for the ball to get it, that makes you so reliant on your other teammates to perform or not perform. Obviously, every striker relies on their teammates to perform or not perform. I understand. But I feel like strikers that wait for the ball, that are like, last line strikers, rather than someone like Jackson that drops deep and will get himself involved. Do you not see that as well as a bit of a potential problem? Or what makes you like a striker that doesn't necessarily get himself involved in build-up, especially nowadays? Obviously, I know City do it nowadays with Haaland, but, all the best teams in the world, realistically, they all kind of play with this. Everyone's involved. You start from the goalkeeper all the way up to the striker in every phase of play. Defensively, offensively, everyone's involved. Why do you think now use a striker that maybe isn't quite of that ilk?
I think it's a mixture of everything, really, like what you've just said. I think with Osimhen, you get basically, you're talking about a Haaland type presence. That is exactly what you're talking about. That is the best comparison for him if you're going to move him into the Premier League. I think he's made for the Premier League. I think the physicality. He's not quite as big as Haaland, though, is he? No, he's not. But in terms of like the physical presence that you're getting, it's that's who you'd compare him to in terms of not like exact build, but like what they're going to offer in the team. It's that, and I think that with Osimhen, you get a different type of presence. Like I said, he can actually build up play. He's not he's obviously not the best at it, but he's good at holding up the ball, so he can do that. He can't, as well as Jackson, wriggle away and find his way to then make that into something out of nothing. I wouldn't say that, but he can come in, link up play with little touches, and then run in behind and stretch the opposition. But the other reason I also think this is, Gyökeres was another one that I was massive on last season. But I think that window for me is passed, because you're going to be paying ridiculous money for him as well. But I almost think you've got a Gyökeres type with Jackson. So for me, how you extend this team,
except
get more. Again, I think that can develop over time. I think it can get. Yeah, I think it can with him. I think his actual ball striking is not the worst. I think it's composure a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
His actual ability to strike a football isn't terrible, but again, then when you add an Osimhen, you're adding a very prolific. He is a prolific goal scorer. He's not had his best year this season, but even so, he always scores goals. At Lille, he was always getting double digits in a not the best Lille team. He had his amazing season last year when everything clicked. this season it's not clicked as much with the managerial changes. Some injuries with him, some injuries with I think there's been some prolonged time with Nicolas Jackson out the side as well, and just changes in the midfield. They've not quite been able to sustain possession as well as they did, which means less chances for Osimhen. So like you said, I do agree to an extent with the if Osimhen's not getting fed as much, will he start to become blameable? But this is where I would say, and this is where people are going to disagree with me, this is where hopefully you would want them to realise this, and that's when you bring Jackson into a game, because he's going to impact the game more in that specific environment. But then, obviously, with the looming price tag, do they have the balls, essentially, to drop their expensive players?
Like, will you choose based on the game? Like, okay, today Jackson fits better than Osimhen, and will you actually put Osimhen on the bench? That's the part I doubt. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's where I can be more simple. Like, that's where I agree with people, and I understand their hesitance towards it, because I do get that. But if in an ideal world, I think having a Jackson and an Osimhen, you combine the qualities that you get from both of them, and I think you're pretty much set in the striker department. I think that's pretty perfect for me.
There you go. Fair enough. Just to clarify for people as well, in 23 games, because he's been injured for a little bit, and obviously he missed parts of the season while he was at AFCON with Nigeria. He still scored 20 in 23 games. He still scored 15 goals with 3 assists. I'm not sure how many of these 23 were starts and how many came off the bench. I assume the large majority were starts, obviously. But it's not an awful return by any means. But is it 80, 90, 100 million upwards return? And that's the only thing I'm doubting. But what I have just now, and then I'll be honest, I didn't actually know that, and I'm not sure. I assume you both knew that. But I did not realize that when Napoli bought him from Lille in 2020, they bought him for nearly 80 million euros. I didn't know that he was anywhere near that expensive for Napoli. Where on earth have Napoli bought 80 million euros from?
It was talent again, because everybody saw it. Yeah, I think everybody saw it with him. So that's like that. He, again, back then there was a few things in for him. It wasn't just Napoli, but
Chelsea were very interested at the time, if you remember.
Yeah.
Because
he scored put 80 million on the table, though, didn't we?
No, but he scored against us in the Champions League, and I remember there was shit ton of links that I think the summer after for that.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, Pais, got the wrong thing off screen. Where do you stand on it? Like earlier, we touched on how likely is it, but where do you stand on Osimhen? Obviously, Jackson's had a pretty decent season. Now, some people really don't like him. Some people really do. I've said it God knows how many times. What we need is a Giroud, and we're not getting it. So now we're either getting another average striker, or we're getting a really expensive one. Those are essentially our options, right? Or none at all, I suppose. It's that's why it's so frustrating. When you said earlier, revenge for Endrick, I'm like, yeah, but the thing we need is a striker, so we can save ourselves spending 100 million on Osimhen or Gyökeres or whoever else, and in 2 years we actually have a wonder striker like that. Because of having Jackson, it would make way more sense than buying Jackson for 40 million last year and now buying another striker for 80 upwards. But where do you stand on it, Pies? Would you still want Osimhen?
Yes. Yes, I still want Osimhen. I think the one thing that maybe Conor didn't mention, but I know he knows this, is that the aerial threat of Osimhen is absurd. Like, absolutely absurd. He's ridiculous in the air. His leap is crazy.
Yeah.
He scored another header the other day, and I was just like, what the hell? You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy. We haven't had a striker.
It should be a cheat code, realistically. It should be, because the players we have on the wings, like whether you're talking Madueke or Palmer, but also, like, obviously, Mudryk, if you just told Mudryk, okay, go to the byline cross, because he can clearly do that left and right foot. If you have Osimhen in the middle, all you need to do is get it roughly in the right area, and you should get at least 15 to 20 goals from that alone.
Especially against low blocks.
If Rhys James plays 30 games, we're winning the league with Osimhen.
Rhys James, Gusto.
Literally.
Do you know what I mean?
Mudryk's a good crosser as well. He gets into a lot of good positions to cross the ball, and his technique with crosses is very good. It's just this season, a lot of the time when he gets there, there's nobody there. Mudryk.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree completely. I've genuinely, in some games where we're playing like that, and if we have like a target man striker, I've genuinely thought we should think about playing Mudryk on the right. Just let him run down the line and cross on his stronger foot. I know he's really good on his left foot as well, but it's just so quick. It's not like, show him the inside. Yeah, fuck up.
I'll tell you a perfect example of what I mean was that I think last game, do you remember that left-footed cross Palmer put in when he was out on the left and he just whipped it in?
Yeah.
That, like, I'm not saying Osimhen would score from that, but he would run to that, he would anticipate that, and he'd get on that, and he'd be in the box, and something would happen. But obviously, because Jackson isn't that type of striker, you know, like it's that difference that you'll see, and it will how am I say this? Increase our goals, even if Osimhen isn't scoring them, because I think the amount of times he'll get the ball in the box and cause havoc will lead to goals in itself as well. So, I think we should definitely get in. And also, like, one of the things people say is like he's injury prone. Well, if you're a Jackson fan, well then Jackson can play, can't he? So, you know what I mean? Like,
but it's still a lot of money for someone injury prone. I think that's what people are saying.
Yeah, I get it, but like if you want Jackson to play, well then if Osimhen's injured, then it's a good chance, isn't it? So
I mean, I've said it before. He's had two kind of slightly more concerning injuries, like the broken cheekbone. That is a freak stuff that has nothing to do with injury prone or not injury prone. But he's had two over a month, like hamstring issues. Those are like more of the problems. Of course, you see muscular problem there, fitness. You know,
just don't keep Poch and we'll be fine. Just don't keep Poch and we'll be fine.
It's going to be so interesting if Poch stays, and we'll get to that conversation in a few minutes. Because obviously we've read at PSG, we've read it at Spurs, apparently also at Southampton, that the whole injury problems with Spurs with Poch in his first season. But I don't think it was much of an issue in the following season. So I'm really intrigued whether we will at least reap benefits from this injury-plagued season with a less injury-plagued season next season, or have all our players been injured so much that they couldn't even actually increase their fitness, and it will happen all the same next season? Because it might well do. It's God knows. For me, Osimhen, right? It's because obviously, and this is not me, but a lot of people, when thinking about Osimhen, they will see the Lukaku comparison, right? You signing for around 100 million from a club in the Serie A. And let's be real, people are racist and black, right? That's how far people's minds go when they don't know what they're talking about. But what I love so much about Osimhen in comparison to Lukaku is a man mountain, right? He has ridiculous power, and once he gets going, he's fast as well. But he's so big that his turn of direction, that his change of speed, like whether it's accelerating or stopping, is so slow. Especially over the last few years. Like obviously when he was at United, then he fixed himself at Inter, but then he came back to Chelsea and I don't know, found Deliveroo again or what happened. But now in Roma, he looks like he's did at Chelsea. And he's just, he's huge. But for some reason, Lukaku must be the worst player in the air that's that big I've ever seen. Like he just can't jump. Like when he was at Chelsea, I'm not sure what you guys think, but his timing is so bad. And like Osimhen is like the complete opposite. And also I'm not going to say crazy agile, but still, for someone that's 6'2", because of the body type that he has, he's certainly a lot more mobile than someone like Lukaku is, while still adding that physical and aerial presence. So I do like those aspects about it, but I do worry about a few things still. I mean, JP says Tammy was bad in the air too. Sure, but you know, when people are tall, it always depends when did they grow tall. If you were short until you were like 16, 17, when you learned most of your football basics, then you're probably never going to be a great header of the ball, even if you grew really tall after, maybe later in your life, in your career. But if you've always been tall, always been a striker that goes for heading, even youth football, then you're going to be good at football. Good at football. Good at heading. So I don't know if Tammy just grew late and that's why he always played, like only knew how to use his feet. But yeah, he scored 15 goals in his first season. Only Diego Costa scored more in the last 20 fucking years, man. People piss me off.
You know that Osimhen as well has like a catalogue of headed goals. So I don't think it's the same as like a Tammy. And
for sure. I don't even think they're saying Osimhen is bad. Like everyone knows Osimhen is good in I think and I hope.
But also, it's like Osimhen presses a lot, doesn't he, Connor? Like I've been told this. Like I've obviously watched him, but apparently, like people that watch Napoli regularly, apparently he presses really well, and that just ends all Lukaku comparisons instantly because Lukaku couldn't press to save his life. So.
Osimhen works. He works his tail off all game. Yeah. He's a proper workhorse, and that's what I mean as well. I think he just is. To me, he's also just, I think he'll be a leader in this team. I really do. I think he'll spur a lot of players on just with his energy and just how he is, just how he holds himself. Like, that's another reason I want him. I think he's another example, whilst he's not like a 30-year-old, I think he's another example of just experience. He's won things. I just think he brings that, he'll bring that air of calmness to a lot of other players around the team as well. So that's another reason.
I absolutely love the fact, by the way, that since that broken cheekbone, that he's just kept playing with that mask because
it's so cool. I love
it. Like, he just likes doing it. And genuinely, it would be intimidating. Like, if you've got this guy who you know doesn't need... To be honest, I'm surprised that he's allowed to wear that mask when he doesn't need that mask. When you think of, like, what was it like? Was it the Irish national team and like some sort of Euros when they wore underpants and it wasn't like, it was from some sort of not allowed brand, so then it got banned? But a head protective mask, that's perfectly fine, obviously, even though you don't need it. So, but yeah, I mean, if I was a defender and you've got this absolute mad guy, like, he stood there with his mask on, like, he's gonna just headbutt everyone and not be scared. Do you know what I mean? Because he's got a mask on his face. Genuinely, really, everyone should be doing it because it protects your face. Like, it would be quite smart, I feel like, you know, everyone's always talking about concussions and all sort of, you know, head injury problems. Well, if they've all got a mask on, probably a bit less of an issue, I guess.
Like Rudiger's mask gave him that
all
plus,
that, you
plus
know?
10 and everything as well.
Exactly, especially De Bruyne. Imagine he had a mask. We might have not won the Champions League. There you go. That's how crazy it can be. But yeah, enough Osimhen talk. I would say a few smaller bits and bobs of like outgoings that will most likely happen at Chelsea. Fabrizio said exclusive. Chelsea and Armando Broja are planning to part ways this summer. Permanent transfer expected as soon as he returns from Fulham loan. Albanian #1 striker is on the list of several clubs in Europe and the Premier League looking at him as the main option. I'm not sure how much that, Fulham loan would have helped with that, but there you go. That is what it is. Fabrizio has also said that Chelsea have Kepa as one of the players that we want to sell. Not exactly surprising, but I'll say this much. I'll believe it when I see it. We've tried to sell Kepa many times and have failed. And now we've sent him to Real Madrid. Okay, big club. But he, in the end, fell behind Lunin, who Real Madrid didn't rate enough to not sign a goalkeeper in the first place because they were like, oh, shit, Courtois is injured. Lunin ain't good enough, so now we need someone else. And by the end, now Lunin is playing over Kepa. So it hasn't exactly gone well for Kepa's reputation. So unless Bilbao want him back for some reason, I don't really see where he's going to go, if I'm honest. But hey, that I guess it's a different debate. What you're going to do, let's just wait and see. I mean, it says it down here as well. Ziyech will become Galatasaray player at the end of the season. Chelsea don't consider him a Chelsea player anymore. And also Fabrizio said Chelsea will make many sales in the month of June because obviously the financial year ends on June 30th. So if we want to, save our books or help our books, then we need to do it before June 30th. But yeah, on that note, Hakim Ziyech, that has been confirmed today by Fabrizio. Hakim Ziyech will not return to Chelsea as he's staying to Galatasaray on a permanent move. Obligation to buy clause triggered and signed as Chelsea already sent a letter to Gala confirming the agreement. Just for people being aware, officially, the obligation to buy is for a whole £0. So that's fantastic. Now, obviously, there was a loan fee there, and there's some people talking that there's going to be some bonuses, but the official fee is going to be £0. But yeah, not much more to say, is there? Like Fabrizio's tweet said earlier, Chelsea have not considered him a Chelsea player for a while. Another small piece of news: Cole Palmer won Chelsea Player of the Year and Chelsea Players Player of the Year. Obviously, very much so expected. For the women's team was Lauren James and Jess Carter. So fair play to them. Not quite sure how Jess Carter managed that, but fair enough. She must be doing something right. I've watched a few of the women's games, not all of them, so not fully fair to judge, but surprised that Jess Carter won it. But hey, there you go. But now let's talk about the Pochettino situation, because what I put on the title and what I put in the thumbnail is Chelsea don't really know what they're doing with Poch. Let me get this tweet from Pies up from a couple of days ago. I need to just find it. Because Chelsea or not even a couple of days ago, either it was today or yesterday, Chelsea are apparently holding a 4-way meeting between Roman Abramovich, I wish, Todd Boehly, Benoit Badiashile, Laurenz Vescoli. Am I mixing the names up? Lauren Stewart, that's it, and Paul Winstanley. About what to do with Pochettino. So, Pies, what do you think? Because to me, it genuinely feels like right now, especially after the recent upturn of form, it genuinely feels like they don't know what to do, and it genuinely feels like they're not sure what to do. Do you feel like that as well, or what do you think happens from here on out? And obviously, add your opinion to it as well.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. I don't know. Honestly, like, you could go on about this for hours and try and predict what's going to happen, but I just don't know. To be honest, I don't know what's going to happen. I think you can go down the lane of, okay, are injuries his fault? Are they not? If they're not his fault, then well, you probably just give him another season because we have had a ridiculous amount of injuries. Like every bullet point that they're going to judge him on has like a caveat to it as well. So I'm interested how they're going to judge this at the end of the season because I spoke to Gabriel Marcotti yesterday when I was on the playback with Alex Goldberg, and I think he said it right. He said if Chelsea are generally just going right, if you get Europa League, you're staying. If not, you're gone. You're a fool. Like you are actually a fool, is what he said. Like the owners are fools. If they just think a table is good enough to pass judgment, then that's ridiculous. And it is because you need to judge on a long-term pick. You need to judge over the whole season. You need to judge, like Simon Johnson put something out this morning in an article, and he said that, people close to Chelsea, speaking anonymously, have said that the training's, like underwhelming and stuff like that. Well, if the training sessions aren't good, why the fuck's he the manager? You know what I mean? Like, but at the same time, you've got a lot of credible people saying that, well, the squad hasn't fallen out with him, so the squad's still behind him. Quite a few of the players have said that. So it's like, what do you do? Because everything is like 1 point's bad, 1 point's good, this point's bad, this point's good. So what do you do in that
And
scenario?
then you've got not only that problem, you've got the problem. If we did want a different manager, who on earth do we get?
Who is there? Like,
who on earth can we even get? Who would even say yes?
It's a weird one, man. Because you had Ornstein rule out Amorim. Like, I was pretty sure, based on previous links, maybe Amorim would be one of the favourites, but no, he's seemingly ruled out, and it's just a weird one because it's like when you come to like an end of the season sort of. Like you're potentially thinking about changing the manager. Usually there's a general side of like you can predict what's going to happen, like especially if you think he's going to go. But I can't with these owners. I can't with these directors because in this situation you've got a lot of things that are potentially good, especially considering if we give him another season. Like one of the main arguments is just some stability in the club. We haven't had stability since this ownership's taken over. Another argument is that the players are seemingly behind him. But then again, there's caveats. There's like, oh, but what about this that he's not done well? What about that? But, even when you look at bad data or whatever, like, we've conceded the most amount of goals in, our Premier League history, I think, in a season, right? Well, then you could just go and say, well, actually, we've scored like so many more goals than we did under Potter, so that's progress.
We're currently on 96 goals in all competitions, which
it's
4 away from 100. And I'm like, genuine question of top flight teams, and I know you guys won't have the answer. I'm more throwing it out there. But of top flight teams, so like not championship and stuff, how many teams that aren't in European competitions have scored over 100 goals in a season? Like, I feel like that's not a common thing if you don't have European competitions to add more games. Like, we've done it before, but not when we weren't in Europe. Like, I feel like 100 goals in 38 games plus cup games is a lot of flipping goals. I don't know about that, but yeah, that's what my question. How have we scored 96 goals? Because it felt like we only started scoring goals in like February because we weren't scoring a lot of goals in the first half of the season. Like, I heard some stats or people talking about some stats yesterday. Like, in our first 18 games of the season, we lost 8 games. In the game since then, we've only lost 3 games, obviously, but that including the defeat, the batterings at Liverpool and at Arsenal, including obviously that Wolves defeat. But to go from 8 to 3 is certainly an improvement. But yeah, it surprises me as well. But like you say, Pys, like there's so much that's been questioned. Sources, like you said, sources close to the club speaking anonymously to protect relationships, talk about underwhelming training methods. Someone said here, if training methods are underwhelming or training is underwhelming, then Poch isn't responsible for the injuries, just fake news. I think you're slightly misinterpreting what underwhelming means. I think underwhelming is more like old school and stuff rather than like modern, I think.
Well, yeah, that can be like, lack of tactical training sessions or whatever. But, like Julian Laurent said at PSG that, his French sources have basically said that he didn't do a lot of tactical work at PSG and it was more about freedom of expression and stuff. And funnily enough, you look at this Chelsea team, maybe that's the reason why we're scoring so many bloody goals, is because we let all our attackers express ourselves. There's not really a clear structure. There's not clear tactics. You know what I mean? So, mate, like there's caveat. I hate it because there's caveats to everything, and you can argue one way and you can argue the other. And and I think not even because of our recent form, but if you just sit back and think about it, especially with the lack of sort of managerial candidates, it's not as simple as a few months ago where you're just like Poch out his shit. Like there's a lot of like different things you now have to think about, I think, because of like the situation we're in, especially with the managers. It's hard. It's really hard.
No, I agree completely. And if I bring the other tweet from you up again, in terms of that, it says in this four-way meeting, not only Igbali and Boehly are going to take part in it, but also Stewart and Winstanley and Pys, that we know that Winstanley doesn't exactly get on particularly well with the Serbi. The fact that he is in this meeting suggests to me that he still has a lot of say. And if he does have a lot of say and he doesn't get on with the Serbi, then that for me takes out another one of the more likely candidates out of the question. If we now take what's his face, Ornstein's word for it, that Amorim won't happen, Flick won't happen, Jose won't happen, Conte won't happen. If we think from that perspective, the Serbi is less likely. Obviously, we don't know, but if Stewart has, if Winstanley has that much say, why would he get someone he doesn't like that? If I was him, I would get someone that I don't like. You know what I mean? Like, well, it would be a stupid thing to do. But then you add on top of that, like, who else on earth is there? Like, are we really going to get Sebastian Hoeneß? No, aside from the fact that he's extended his contract, but obviously you could still try to make something happen. But the problem is also, it's the 8th of May. Like, are you going to just find the manager now? Like, you know, it's how often does it happen that you go into the end of the season, let's say, with 2 weeks left, and you don't know yet whether your manager is staying or leaving? Like, that in and of itself is a questionable position for us to be in, I find. Like, it's just, I mean, even in this article, there's like Poch speaking about it as well. Like, Poch seems to not know. And like, if I was Poch, I'd be fuming as well. Like, I'll be honest, I don't want to sit here and defend Poch. But what seemed, I can't remember where I read this and who said this. And perhaps maybe you know who said this. But there was talk how apparently Poch is kind of furious how earlier in the season he was always told, we'll give you time. You know, you have time. Don't worry necessarily about results, blah, blah, blah. And now in April, they all of a sudden switch it up on you need to get Europa League or you're sacked. That in and of itself, like, is there a part of you, Pys, that thinks Chelsea are trying to get Poch to quit?
Don't think he will though, because
I don't think he will either. But are they trying?
I mean, potentially. I don't know. I mean, there's definitely a lot of disconnect there. I mean, I put a tweet up my other account the other day, and just some things I'd heard, you know, others had said as well in terms of experienced players. Like, he was a big fan of Dybala back in the summer, and obviously he wanted a taller midfielder, and Chelsea bought Ugochukwu instead of like a proven Premier League midfielder, which he wanted. He wants Gallagher to stay, obviously, and my understanding was that he wanted Thiago Silva to stay as well, and Silva wanted to stay, but there was no contract offered, so obviously he had to leave. So there's a lot there already that you think just isn't working. I've said this to some journalists who are arguing with me that Pochettino should stay, and just it's like, no, because the alignment isn't there. A project is supposed, especially with all this bullshit that comes out, all these PR briefs about, like, you know, how with the managers so connected, and, you know, like, we collaboration and all this BS. It's not a collaboration. I've said it all before. It's a dictatorship. Essentially, what it is you get a manager, and they have no say in the transfers. They may recommend profiles, but in terms of actual names, they don't get their actual names or whatever. It's not like Roman where a manager can go, okay, can you come and get this player or whatever. It doesn't happen like that in this ownership. They give you the players and you coach them and you try and get the best out of them, and they try and find fits for that, right? And that is a dictatorship, in my opinion. From everything I see and hear, it's not. I find it hard to see it's a collaboration more than a dictatorship. I think it's too controlling.
And that in and of itself makes me think it's more likely that they keep him, because how many managers will agree to that? You know, like that's another obviously concern. There's and that's why we'll only get lesser managers that are like, well, yeah, this is not ideal,
You know
but
what I
still,
don't like?
Chelsea's
though?
to step up, for my
You
career,
know what?
not just do it and then we see what I do after.
But you know what I don't like about it is that I feel like Chelsea. I don't know if it's lying, but it's like I feel like potentially leading these managers down a wrong path in the sense that I think Graham Potter was led to believe different things than he found out once he started working with them. You know what I mean? And I think Pochettino.
But it's
has
different
done
for
that as
Potter,
well.
right? Because he was the first one. So he didn't really have any evidence to go on. And the new managers would know, okay, Potter didn't have a say, Poch didn't have a say. Likelihood is I won't have a say. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard, but I think because we're Chelsea, we're always going to have a manager lined up. But I feel like with the way we do things, and
But who?
even
I
our
genuinely
recruit,
don't know who they'd have lined up right now. Everyone that I
they'll have
thought could be
someone.
happening.
They'll have someone because they've been looking for weeks in terms of due diligence in case they were going to sack Poch. So
Yeah, but obviously they've done that, and we heard about that. But then you see this Ornstein tweet coming out about who it's definitely not going to be. That sounded like, okay, the due diligence ended up in we are not getting these guys rather than we are getting that guy. I don't know.
I mean, maybe like just thinking about like this ownership, what they would do. Maybe they do go for the German guy. Maybe they go for the Girona manager. They like fancy shit. They like like. They might go back to another wild card option because the worrying thing about this is they thought Pochettino was the safe bet, right? They thought he was the experienced guy that was gonna, bridge the gap and bring it together and bring stability. And it's like
so they can in a year or two's time bring another like no name in.
So it's like this is my worry. It's like I would, as much as I dislike Pochettino, I would much rather keep him than have another massive risk. I do not want another massive. I don't want the Girona manager. I don't care. I don't want him. I'd rather keep Pochettino, honestly.
Yeah.
I'm not doing this bullshit from these small clubs again, coming into Chelsea. They just won't hack it. They won't hack it.
And I agree with that, unfortunately. But the difficult bit is, Conor, you said it earlier, you're in a position where you think we're probably best off just keeping Poch for another year and then looking next year, which purely because of who these owners are willing to consider. Like if they were like, okay, let's apologize to Tuchel and bring it back. I'm like, okay, let's do that. Why not? But because they're not going to do that, all the other options are either off the table, don't want us, or we don't want them. Do you know what I mean? And the weird one, De Zerbi, where it's like, apparently one of our board doesn't like him and there's like nothing happening. Like, even though it could, like it's right there. Like we have half of his good players. Like we have Caicedo, we have Cole, we have Mudryk. Like, you know what I mean? But the fact that there's not more to that yet tells me it's not happening, because that would be like we've clearly have plenty of relationship with Brighton. But also, I think the owners are a bit scared of the PR backlash if we get another Brighton person, which I understand, if I'm honest, and I arguably agree that purely for that reason, it's not a good sign, because we need to put ourselves in a position where the fans are not permanently negative. And if you get another Brighton manager, they're not going to be fucking happy, are they?
Lawrence, can I ask you something, though?
Go on.
If, like, I'll maybe agree with you about this PR thing, but just to play devil's advocate, if they cared about PR so much, do you think they would be selling Gallagher?
No. But it's. I don't think it's. Well, they want to sell Gallagher, obviously, but I don't think they want to sell Gallagher because they either don't like him or they don't care what the fans think. I mean, they don't care what the fans think, but they've also put themselves in a position where it's not like, I don't think it's a case of, okay, we don't think that guy's good enough, we want to make money on him. We've spent so much money that now we need to make some money back. Who are the players best suited to do that? Gallagher, Chalobah, Broja, Maatsen, Hall,
They've spent the Gallagher money already, essentially. That's how I view it as well. I think Gallagher and Chalobah are as good as gone, essentially, just because of previous moves they've made. They've already spent that money in, and now it just so happens that Gallagher and Chalobah are doing so well that now it's going to cause a big backlash because people don't want them to go. Rightfully so, but it's already been spent.
Exactly. So the only thing that can save us out of that is, at this point, slightly surprising qualification for the Europa League, which will bring in some money. And with that qualification for Europa League, potentially coming bigger potential sponsors. They give us more money and therefore a bit more extra cash comes in. Therefore, you don't quite need the sale of Gallagher and then you only sell Chalobah. Or maybe you only sell Gallagher and you keep Chalobah or whatever. Someone in the chat said earlier, we sold Koulibaly after a year. Why not sell Disasi after a year and just keep Chalobah? Well, pure profit is why, mate. That is quite simple. But yeah, I mean, Conor, elaborate on why you think where the best thing to do right now is to just stick with Poch? Is it a case of because of stability, or is it more to do with the lack of good other options? What do you think?
It's literally a mix of everything, and I've said this since pretty much mid-season. I think it was after the Liverpool and Wolves losses back to back, which were terrible, and everybody wanted Poch out. And I wasn't even against the idea of if Poch leaves, fine. But I do think that Poch is here to do a job that people aren't seeing at the minute, which is fair enough. But I think he's purely there to be that middleman, and at least I hope it's this way, because no matter what, at the end of next year, even if we're doing like better than we've seen so far, I still think that long term the division isn't to be with Pochettino long term, like even if he improves, because I do think that the squad is being built away from his style eventually. Whether he tactically innovates to the point where he innovates so much that it's almost like the other managers that you would go for, that's a completely different world, but that's like a 2%. Like, you're talking such a low chance of that happening, of him innovating towards a like Guardiola style of football. But my point is with him, I think he at least offers in that 2-year contract, he at least offers stability. He's willing to take the hit for his players. Yes, that can be seen in a bad way at times, because then do they get complacent? Fair enough. But in a young team, I think he has provided that base level of calmness for them to at least come into the team. It's a new team that's been formed together, and I think he's a good person to be in and around that. They obviously all like him. A lot of them love him. And I think, again, this is a good thing for them at a young age, I think, to bridge the gap between them and the next coach. But where the problem then lies is, do they then get tricked into the idea that Pochettino is the long-term guy? Because for me, no matter what, he isn't. He's going to get us to where we need to be by 2025. Then what do you do? And that's another thing where, do the board get it right? Do they get it wrong? And from what we've seen so far, how much trust do you have in that? So for me, I'd keep him next season, again, purely because I think a lot of the options, my options would have been Amorim or De Zerbi. They're the two that I maybe would have taken the punt on this summer. But next summer, I think it's an easier thing to do. And like I said, I think Pochettino, he'll be willing, if we have another bit of a drop-off next season at some point, he'll take the hit for a lot of the players, so it won't damage as much as, say, a De Zerbi came in, we started poorly, and everything just comes crashing down on us straight away. I think maybe another year of that stability and willing to take the punt, or like willing for him to take the hit, it could actually help everybody in the long term. So I think we've obviously got to start looking at this as more of a long term thing. I know a lot of people have, and I know a lot of people are bored of it, which fair enough, because who likes losing? But I think eventually you have to almost think what makes the most logical sense if you're looking at a 365-day pattern or period of time. And I think right now, as you two said, I think Pochettino is probably the safe bet right now to stick with him, and that's what I'd do.
Yeah, and I've said it before. I'm still kind of Poch out, but I will keep final judgment until the end of the season. And like I say, if we play to this level for the last 3 games, then I think it's not enough. But like I said earlier, if I've asked for tactical changes all season, then I can't sit there and only complain that it happened too late when they do happen. Like, okay, yeah, they did happen too late. But still, this is one of the things that we've complained and asked for all year. Then when it happens, we can't almost ignore it. Like, that would also be, first of all, counterintuitive, but also just very hypocritical for me. But I want to bring up one last thing that Pies mentioned earlier, and I just want to give my thoughts on that as well, because obviously when Poch said, responding to a question on Cucurella's new role, that he and his staff have a lot of tactical ideas in their hand, and they will show the future. But first, they will show that in the future. But first, the team needs to have belief, build trust, and learn to compete. And like Pai said earlier, in terms of competing, I maybe even agree with that. But I don't see how, to learn to compete, you need to first play in a bad system. I don't see how that helps. But the last bit, the trusting and confidence, the worse the system, the less trust you're going to have in your staff, and the less confidence you're going to have because you're not winning games. So I feel like whatever he's waffling there, it's like, as much as I was turning positive, slightly positive again, like with the games, with the results, with the performances, when I saw this, then I was like, no, man, you've just understood nothing. Like, how can you sit there and say now, we had to learn to compete first? We're talking about, you moved Cucurella. He was the person in the whole squad that needed to learn to compete the least. maybe after Gallagher. But the last problem Marc Cucurella ever had was a lack of intensity and competing, for flip's sake. Like, what are you talking about? It's just when I hear this, I'm like, what do you mean this needs to, like, and there's a comparison below. Before you sit, you need a chair. No, mate, you can sit on the floor if you're tired first. You don't need a chair first, because if you're never resting, you're just going to take 3 years to build your chair. Well, if you sit on the floor every evening, you've got to build the chair in a week. Do you know what I mean? You absolute moron. Like, it's just, what do you mean? You need to, like, I mean, Conor, I know this, and he probably didn't mean it quite as seriously as the quote suggested. But when you read that, when you hear that, just like, why? Or do you see that? Do you have a different opinion to me and Pice on this quote?
No, I do think it's not quite the thing to come out with now. I think probably when he says the team needs to have, like, build trust, it's probably more so, does he trust all these players? Because this is, again, when I was trying to root around for why have we not seen this earlier, I sort of come to the conclusion that unless he just decide, like, literally, the only possible explanation in my idea is that he just didn't trust certain players in certain roles, because otherwise it literally makes no sense at all as to why he wouldn't have done it. So maybe he's, in that sense, building trust, like players to believe in each other, to, like, Cucurella and Caicedo to have an understanding of each other. And, like, maybe he didn't want to show the cards whilst the team wasn't ready, because then if he showed the cards and the team wasn't ready, maybe it would capitulate even more. So I get that to an extent, but I just think, firstly, having like you said earlier, having a tactical structure to build from, that helps players' development anyway. So that's a point on its own. And then also just to come out and say it, I think it's not really going to resonate well with people when we've had such a poor period of the season and then it's improved because of the tactics, to then say that you just decided not to do them. That's not exactly going to go down well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm not sure who Sonoma is. Maybe it's a chair brand, but I'm pretty sure they do, if I'm honest. But anyway, I think it's about time we slowly wrap this one up. Like I said, I don't really think Chelsea know what they're doing. I guess the last thing I could quickly bring up is the Premier League table, because it's interesting in the sense that we are in a reasonable position now, because we are 7th. So as of right now, we're actually not in a European spot, but there's a good chance we will be in a European spot. The problem is United are the team where Newcastle are most likely to drop points for us to catch Newcastle, but United are so bad that the likelihood of Newcastle dropping points against United is quite slim. But also, if United turn up for the cup final like they did against Liverpool, no, City is different to Liverpool, but still, if United win the FA Cup final and come 8th and we come 7th, then we don't actually play in Europe at all. Or I'm not sure which way is worse. If we come 7th, they come 8th and win the FA Cup and we are nowhere. Or if it's actually worse if we manage 6th, but then Man United win the FA Cup and we still only play Conference League. That would maybe even be the worst combination of the situation to come out of this. But as a last question before we wrap this one up, Pice, I'll start with you. Where do you think Chelsea will finish with those 3 games remaining? And also, I want you to essentially predict the cup final result in terms of, will United ruin things for us in that sense?
United ain't winning shit, so don't worry about that. I think United are losing the next 2 games as well. I think they're losing against Arsenal, and I think they're losing or drawing against Newcastle. They've had some really off games at Old Trafford this season. So for those people saying, "Oh, Man United at home, they're shit," don't worry. So I still think they're going to, well, to be fair, not do us a favour. I think United probably don't even get European football this season. That's my prediction. I mean, I watched it. I know they got injuries, but holy shit, they have been awful, honestly, for a long time now. And it's why, you know what I was saying? Like, I was so angry with Poch like a couple of months ago because we were behind them. People were like, "Oh, Pice, Man United, they're obviously better than us." Bro, I literally, honestly, I have a friend who's a Man United fan. He's literally like, he was laughing at me like, "How are you behind us?" Even like 2-3 months ago, they were so shit. But they just used to get bailed out by McTominay and Bruno every game. But yeah, I think in terms of where we'll finish, we've still got 3 and Newcastle have got 2, right? Is that correct? So
we've all got 3, it seems.
Oh, right. Well, who's Newcastle's last game? Who's Newcastle got?
Is it Brentford? I think in the back of my head, I would have said Brighton, United, Brentford. That might be wrong.
Let me just figure that out.
As far as I'm aware, though, they've
got United, Brentford, Newcastle. Wait,
No,
no,
it's
that
not,
must
yeah.
be a friendly. That can't
That is a
that's got to be
friendly.
something different because that's the last day of the season. So they've got Brighton, United, Brentford. That's it. That's
Yeah.
the last.
Right. So I think I see Newcastle probably getting 6 points there somehow. I think maybe.
9, you mean?
No, I think 6. I think they might lose at Brentford or something.
See, I think I think they could draw one, whether either
Yeah.
at United or at Brentford, but I just don't think they'll lose one. And then we're still behind them, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'd probably say Newcastle finish ahead of us, to be honest, looking at that.
I'd hedge my bets that in those 3 games they lose at least one, just because I don't think Newcastle pick up 7
We have to
points.
be perfect. I think
Yeah,
we have
I agree
to be
with that.
perfect. I think we have to win. I think we have to get 9 points from our last 3 games.
And that's a separate issue, right? Obviously, our last game being Bournemouth, so Forest, Brighton, and Bournemouth. Like, obviously, I know our recent form. You'd think, oh, look at how great we were against West Ham and Spurs. But that's also so us that all of a sudden against Forest we lose, like or draw. Like it would be so us to do that.
The Forest one's difficult this weekend because I think they didn't get their points deduction removed, and they're fighting for their lives. And
but they are 3 points clear at least, so like they have some safety. But
if Luton lose as well, because they play at 3 o'clock, we play at 5:30. If Luton lose, there's a 6-point gap, which is basically only gettable by goal difference. So if Luton lose before, so that's what I mean. So if Luton lose the 3 o'clock game, hopefully they go in with like their heads down. Not that we should have to rely on that, but that.
I'd say just one thing: we are now on a goal difference of 11. If we do like against Everton, against West Ham for the next 3 games, maybe we catch Newcastle. I mean, probably not, but you never know.
If we finish 5th, I will just.
I mean, to be fair, some other people have said maybe Spurs just lose every game because they have. Where's their last game? This one. So they've got Burnley, City, and Sheffield United. They're not losing to Burnley.
They're not all Sheffield.
Sheffield are long relegated, but then you're not losing to them, are you?
That's what I mean. You're not going to lose. They'll lose to City and they'll win the other 2.
Yeah. Maybe they'll like happen to draw on the last day or whatever, but they're not going to lose. So we're not going to finish at the Spurs. I mean, there is a chance we finish at Newcastle, but I genuinely think we'll end up finishing 7th. What do you think, Connor?
Yeah, I think if you're being as fair as possible and just trying to be realistic, it's probably 7th. I think there's a good chance at 6th, but like Pi said, I think you have to literally be perfect because I think Newcastle will get 6 points. I agree with that. I don't necessarily know which one of the games they drop, but I don't think Newcastle are so consistent that they get 7 out of those last 3 games, just because I think all 3 of them pose their own challenges. Yeah. So I do think they get 6. So I do think the door's open. Yeah. But then it comes to us being perfect, which again, it is so us to go and lose one of those games. Like Bournemouth, last day of the season, Bournemouth on the beach, we'll go lose 4-2. I could just see it, that sort of thing.
Don't we play them at home? I saw you playing them at home.
Yeah,
we do. But I meant, I meant they'll be on the beach in terms of they'll be. Like,
Solanke just like, you know what? I'm going to score a hat trick today.
That's what I mean. And it was just something could happen. So if we're perfect, I think we come
well,
6th.
It's not even in our hands looking at it, really.
No, it's not.
Newcastle. No, it's not.
Newcastle or Spurs need to absolutely bottle it.
Yeah.
Well, Newcastle is maybe harsh to call it absolutely bottle it, but they need to bottle it. So.
And, God help us if Man U somehow finish above us. That's all
I don't think they will.
No, I don't think they will either.
I think they're too shit, honestly.
I think they're lucky if they win another game. But, well, I mean, who else have they got? They've got Arsenal now, so good luck with that. Then they've got Newcastle. Well, hey, if they do beat Newcastle, brilliant.
For us, yeah.
And, well, to be honest, against Brighton, they might win because Brighton can't beat anyone. So,
but that's away, though. I don't even think they win that, to be honest.
Yeah, and even these games, Brighton against these Newcastle United teams, I actually think suit them more because they'll actually come and play against Brighton, whereas Brighton have had more trouble against low blocks than they have against teams that play them. So if they actually come and give them a game,
United want to just sit deep and counter-attack against everyone, including Brighton?
I don't know. I think they'll try and take the game.
They're too open. They play like Poch ball.
True. It is true.
Poch ball without Cucurella inverted.
Yeah. Did you hear, by the way, apparently the most likely destination for Florian Wirtz is also Real Madrid. Like, Real Madrid are doing what we are doing with 17-year-olds, just they're doing it with the actual best players in the world. Like, can you relax? Like, you've got Tchouaméni, you've got Camavinga, you've got Bellingham, you've now won Wirtz, you've got getting Mbappe, you've got Vinicius Jr. Can you relax? It's mental, man. Like, come on, leave some for the rest of us, man. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you very much for tuning in, everybody that has done so. Hit that like button if you haven't done so just yet. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't done that either. It would be massively appreciated. Please do check out my 2 wonderful guests down in the description. Of course, check out Conor's YouTube channel, Conor Holden Football, as you can see on screen. Link is down in the description, as well as his Twitter. And of course, the same goes for Pyth. Check out his Twitter as well. And of course, his website, londonsfirst.com. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys for watching. Up the Chelsea, upwards and onwards, and we will see you next time.